Unexpected discovery, millionaire CEO's blind date in disguise reveals his heartfelt loneliness. Jack Henderson scanned the bustling cafe, his mind swirling with thoughts of spreadsheets, boardroom showdowns, and the inescapable weight of his family's expectations. To the world, he was a millionaire CEO radiating success, charm, and wealth. But beneath the tailored suit and designer glasses was a man caught in a tempest of isolation. Words like consultant felt like a cloak over his true identity, a camouflage against reality. He took a deep breath, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee momentarily soothing the chaos within him. This blind date, orchestrated by his mother in yet another attempt to mold him into the perfect son, was just another obligation to check off. As he waited, he felt an acute sense of dissonance pressing against his chest. The cafe buzzed with warmth and laughter, a stark contrast to the sterile environments of his board meetings. Would Sarah, the waitress arriving just moments before, ever truly understand the burden of a family legacy woven tightly into his existence? Her eyes sparkled with a zest for life while he felt trapped in a gilded cage, an empty trophy in a world that praised only accolades and wealth. When she approached, her energy was infectious. "Hi. I'm Sarah," she said, extending a hand. Jack hesitated, the sleek silhouette of his world looming over him. He wasn't sure how to narrow the gap between their vastly different lives. Hence, he introduced himself as a consultant, a stark departure from the truth. The fear of revealing his identity clawed at him, spiraling into a newfound anxiety. Was he betraying this connection from the start? Their conversation flowed like the coffee swirling in their cups. Over artisanal sandwiches, Jack felt his walls begin to melt as Sarah shared her dream to become an artist. Her laughter echoed like a symphony, but it wove itself into a bittersweet melody, intensifying the hollow ache in his heart. He longed to escape corporate politics, to break free from the strangling ties of familial obligation, yet here he was, lying about who he truly was. How was it possible he felt so connected to someone while being so profoundly disconnected from his genuine self? Before the moment could elevate further, an urgent buzz pierced through his fragile bubble of happiness. The call from his rival shattered the tranquility. Jack's resolve faltered. The stakes of his company hung in the balance, the relentless pursuit of success tightening around him like a noose. Panic seeped into his mind, flooding him with visions of boardroom warfare while Sarah remained blissfully unaware. "Is everything all right?" Sarah's voice pulled him back, yet it only intensified his turmoil. He struggled to mask the turmoil brewing in him. The ideal of success seemed suddenly hollow, the orphaned manifestation of a life spent appeasing others. Then, like a dark shadow, the truth slipped through the cracks. A text message involving his corporate title inadvertently surfaced, revealing the part of him he wanted to hide. Jack's heart raced as their eyes met, her smile fading into a mix of confusion and doubt. The laughter that had once filled their corner of the cafe diminished, replaced by an intertwining tension that felt heavier with each heartbeat. How could he bridge the chasm between his two lives, and could she ever truly accept him for who he was? As the storm of emotions swirled around them, he recognized the sheer complexity of their connection was about to reach a tipping point. Would he be left alone again, haunted by vulnerability, or could he step into the light of authenticity with Sarah? The cafe fell silent for a moment as Jack processed the wave of recognition in Sarah's eyes. It was as if a spotlight had beamed down upon him, illuminating the frayed edges of his carefully crafted facade. Each second stretched, weighed down by unspoken questions that hung heavily between them. Was this the moment everything would shatter? Jack's mind raced, furiously calculating his next move. There was something exquisite about the vulnerability he felt in Sarah's gaze, but the fear of her rejection was a powerful force. He suddenly gained clarity, a revelation that he had clutched tightly in the shadows of his soul. His life, controlled by the demands of wealth, status, and expectations, was no longer enough. "Sarah," he began, his voice trembling slightly as he fought against the current of uncertainty, "I am not just a consultant. I'm the CEO of Henderson Enterprises." The words spilled from his lips, startling both of them. Jack braced for her reaction, the heat rising in his face, anxiety coursing through him like wildfire. Would she laugh and walk away? Ask why he felt the need to hide his identity? The question spiraled out of control now that he had stripped himself of the protective layers he had worn for so long. Her expression shifted from shock to contemplation. "You could have just told me," she replied quietly. "I mean, you don't have to hide who you are." Her calmness cut through the tension, and Jack recognized this as a milestone in their encounter. That moment had the power to etch itself into his memory, an arena where truth could displace the crippling shame of his dual existence. Yet, he was still tethered to feelings of doubt. While he craved authenticity, he feared that transparency might alienate him from the only person with whom he had felt a flicker of emotional kinship. "What if I'm not who you think I am?" he countered, desperate to articulate the internal conflict raging within him. "I've built this empire, but inside, I feel like I'm just playing a part in a sad, elaborate game." Sarah leaned closer, her earnest gaze locked onto his. "If you ever feel that way, don't keep it to yourself. Life isn't about wearing masks, it's about connection." Her words struck a chord deep within Jack. The veil of isolation he had lived behind began to lift in the face of her authenticity. With Sarah, he could explore parts of himself he had buried, a flicker of hope sparked in the darkness. For the first time, he considered the possibility that his wealth and prestige might not define him. Instead, it was his choices and the values he upheld that mattered most. But just as the moment began to feel charged with potential, his phone buzzed again. A text from corporate headquarters ignited a familiar sense of dread. Jack glanced at it, his heart sinking. A crisis had emerged, one that demanded his immediate attention. The company's stability could be threatened, and he would inevitably be drawn back into the cold embrace of corporate warfare. "I have to go." The words came out reluctantly. "Something's come up at work." "Jack, we were just starting to connect." The disappointment in her voice struck him like a punch. "I know," he replied hastily, guilt clawing at him. You're stuck in a different world." Sarah's tone shifted, but her expression betrayed her inner struggle. He knew he was at a crossroads. To step back into the chaos of his corporate life was to forsake the opportunity of embracing something real. But lingering doubts rattled in his mind, questioning whether he was capable of forging genuine connections outside of the boardroom. As he stood to leave, their eyes locked once more in a moment of mutual recognition. Jack felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. Could he truly commit to this journey of self-discovery? Determined yet conflicted, he took a deep breath, the aroma of the cafe still clinging to him as he walked out into the tumultuous world he had left behind so often. But this time, he felt the stirring of resolve within him. The phone buzzed again, demanding his attention. The word spelled out a challenge that would set the next phase of his life in motion. A corporate opponent had decided to strike. No longer could he avoid the battle he had run from for too long. With the promise of connection still hovering in the air like a specter, Jack steeled himself. The time had come to face the consequences of his choices, perhaps even redefine what success truly meant. Where would this newly ignited determination lead him next? Would he find clarity amidst the chaos, or would he risk losing everything he had built? As Jack stepped out of the cafe, the creeping autumn chill snapped him back to the reality of his world. The buzz of his phone persisted, each vibration a relentless reminder that he was expected to slip back into his well-defined role as the CEO of Henderson Enterprises. Yet, with every step away from Sarah, the weight of his dual existence settled deeper into his bones. The car ride was suffocatingly silent, the driver's sterile gaze fixed on the road while Jack stared blankly out the window. People hustled by with purpose, voices blended into an indistinct hum. In them, he sensed the normalcy he had always longed for, a stark contrast to the chaos looming over him. The streets he had once navigated with confidence now felt like trails of questions. How had he allowed himself to drift so far from authenticity? Arriving at the towering glass structure that housed his company, a rush of adrenaline mixed with dread surged through him. As he entered the building, the polished floors and bright lights created a harsh atmosphere that amplified his internal strife. Jack was greeted by familiar faces, each smile a reminder of the reputation he'd built and the connections he had forged in a world that demanded more than he could give. His office door swung shut with a resounding click, a barrier between him and a reality that now felt askew. He slumped into his chair, mentally sifting through the crisis that had prompted this emergency meeting. Financial projections were down, rumors of layoffs swirled like autumn leaves caught in a storm. "Jack, we need your input," his COO, Mark, interjected abruptly, breaking through Jack's reverie. Jack's mind, however, was elsewhere. "Yeah, let us hear it," he replied, but the words tasted bitter in his mouth. They spoke of numbers, strategy, profit margins, and yet none of it resonated with the person he wanted to be. The stark contrast between the boardroom discussion and the vulnerability shared with Sarah gnawed at him. Every meeting felt like a rehearsed dance. As he listened, he was struck by the emptiness of it all. Were these just metrics on a spreadsheet, or did they involve real human lives? His hands instinctively clenched into fists, the conflict within him intensifying. Jack yearned to shift the focus from profit to people, yet daring to voice such sentiments within his board would likely spell disaster. "Jack, are you with us?" Mark's voice pulled him from his spiral of thoughts. The room looked at him expectantly. The air thickened. He could either maintain the status quo or disrupt the narrative he had played a part in for too long. "I think we need to consider," Jack began slowly, his voice steadier than he felt. "We need to prioritize our employees. If we focus on morale and transparency, we'll find a way out of this." A few brows furrowed, but surprise rippled through the room. Jack continued, fueled by the flicker of courage ignited during his conversation with Sarah. If he was going to navigate the storm ahead, his approach needed to be human-centric, steering away from the cutthroat mentality that had once defined him. After the meeting, he found himself staring at the impressive skyline from his office window. It was beautiful, but all he saw was isolation. He had to make a decision. Would he stand firm in his newly found conviction or retreat into comfortable predictability? As his thoughts whirled, hope and fear intertwined, the promise of personal change colliding violently with the remnants of corporate indifference that haunted him. What if he could step into a leadership role defined by empathy rather than authority? Just then, a notification on his phone drew his attention once more. It was Sarah, her message crackling with anticipation. She wanted to meet again to deepen their connection. Jack felt a surge of expectant eagerness mixed with confusion. How could he balance this burgeoning relationship while steering the rocky course of corporate consolidation? His heart pounded as he realized that every choice he made from this point forward would shape not only his life, but also the potential for transformation within his company. Would he take the plunge into the unknown outside the office walls, or would the tides of obligation pull him back into the familiar grip of corporate indifference? The moment of truth was approaching, and Jack stood at the precipice of monumental change. The following morning, Jack woke with the taste of uncertainty lingering in his mouth. The sun poured through the blinds, casting jagged shadows on the floor, illuminating the mess of his unmade decisions. He glanced at the blinking notification on his phone again, a lifeline amid the shadows looming in his mind. Sarah's invitation felt both exhilarating and perilous. Could such a connection with her truly ease the burdens he carried, or was it merely a diversion from the storm he faced at work? As he shuffled through his morning routine, the weight of self-doubt pressed heavily on him. Would these moments of authenticity with Sarah enhance the facade he had built at Henderson Enterprises, or would they expose the cracks beneath? Jack reached for his tie, fingers quick to tie the knot, yet his mind swayed around the pulsating idea. He didn't want to pretend anymore. By the time he pulled on his blazer, a flicker of determination ignited within him. What if he embraced this part of himself? What if becoming more human in his leadership could inspire change? Arriving at the office, Jack surveyed the bustling floor. The energy was palpable, yet a thin veil of anxiety shrouded his perception. He moved towards his team, the norm of polite exchanges feeling foreign as he approached them with an uncharacteristic levity. The day was filled with negotiations, but Jack made a conscious effort to steer conversations beyond figures and deadlines. He asked them how they were managing amid the rumors of layoffs. Their faces, initially guarded, began to open up, personal stories trickled through the boardroom metrics, subordinate voices breaking with a newfound courage. Yet, the weight of doubt tugged at him again. Would this more personal approach alienate his executive team? In the midst of those thoughts, the dreaded meeting with Mark loomed on the horizon. He stepped into the conference room, his pulse racing, revealing a conviction he hadn't fully grasped yet. "Jack, we need to keep our focus sharp. Lifting morale is one thing, but our priority must remain the bottom line." Mark's voice reverberated, cutting through Jack's budding resolution. In that instant, Jack felt the tension constrict painfully in his chest. A palpable choice unfurled before him: continue bending to corporate survival tactics or embrace the shift he had begun. What if we approached this from a different angle? Jack found himself saying, surprising even himself. Let us involve our employees, really involve them in how we make decisions. But you know what? This isn't just process improvement, it's about acknowledging them as people, not just resources. Silence filled the room, eyes wide, awaiting defense or retreat. He stood rooted, uncertainty weighing heavy like an anvil, but the spark he felt in his private conversations with Sarah surged. Would they see this as weakness or strength? He was terrified of the potential fallout, yet exhilarated by the possibility of real change. Once again, the room erupted in chatter. Mark scowled but couldn't find the words. "Jack, I'm not sure the board will support this," he finally said, the frustration clearly audible. "Then I'll take it to them," Jack replied, the calm resolve in his voice surprising even himself. He understood that pursuing authenticity required courage and would inevitably set him on a collision course with those who thrived on the status quo. As the meeting concluded with rattled murmurs and a growing sense of dissent, Jack felt the weight of a turning tide beneath his feet. He was not merely a CEO crafting policies, he was a man trying to lead people, and that realization struck him like a bolt of electricity. Later that evening, Jack arrived at Sarah's favorite coffee shop, the enticing aroma wrapping around him like an embrace. He spotted her near the corner, a warm smile cutting through the bustling atmosphere. Stepping forward, he was acutely aware that this connection might offer a refuge from the storm, or perhaps spark the very confrontation he needed. "Hey, you," she said playfully, her voice a welcome balm to his burgeoning fears. As they settled into a conversation that flowed effortlessly, Jack recognized that genuine connections held the power to transform him from within. Yet, amid the laughter and shimmering light, a growing apprehension gnawed at him. In pursuing a deeper connection with Sarah, would he inadvertently unravel the threads of his carefully constructed corporate life? The question lingered, heavy and unresolved, as he leaned closer to her and shared the depths of his struggle. Would this conversation bridge unimaginable gaps, or would it push him deeper into the unknown realms of both his heart and professional destiny? As the coffee shop buzzed around them, Jack leaned in, the clamor fading into background noise. He found himself captivated by not just Sarah's words but her essence. She radiated sincerity, a quality he had long buried under the weight of corporate expectations. The truth tumbled out of him, unfiltered. "I've been pretending wearing a mask to fit into a role, and I don't know how to take it off. I feel lost." Sarah regarded him with an intensity that made the air between them crackle. "You're not alone, Jack. So many people are just as afraid of being real," she replied, her tone inviting but steady. "The question is, why do you think you have to wear that mask all the time? What are you so afraid of?" The inquiry felt like an arrow, striking precisely at the heart of his turmoil. Jack deflected the answer, though the truth clamored for attention. Each word from Sarah created a fracture in his preconceived images of success and identity. He realized he was more than the sum of his title and financial statements, he was a man yearning for authenticity. But vulnerability was fraught with risk. Images of boardroom meetings flooded his mind, the cold glances from his executives, the snide remarks from Mark about emotional leadership. Jack wrestled internally. Did acknowledging his vulnerabilities only deliver fodder for those who thrived on the idea of dominance? Why do you care so much about what they think? Sarah pressed, tilting her head, her eyes locking onto his. Is your identity tied to their perceptions? Her question echoed in his mind, unraveling his tightly knit worldview. Was he merely a mirror reflecting the expectations of others? The thought sent a tiny shiver through him. I guess I have let the opinions of others define me, he murmured. But I want to change that. I want to lead in a way that brings people together, not divides them. She smiled, warmth radiating from her expression. That's the first step, Jack. Self-awareness is powerful, but it's what you do with that revelation that counts. Her encouragement ignited a spark within him. The idea of being a leader who fostered connection rather than competition began to shape his resolve. As they delved deeper into their conversations, discussing dreams, aspirations, and fears, Jack felt an exhilarating transformation happening within him. The walls surrounding his heart started to crumble. The notion of genuine leadership moved from a theoretical construct to a tangible possibility. He realized that he could harness his vulnerabilities to foster resilience, not just in himself, but within his team. As the night wore on, Jack's phone vibrated, a message lighting up the screen, a reminder of the impending investor meeting, the looming specter of corporate strategies that opposed his newly forming beliefs. The shadow of dread flickered over his thoughts, grounding him back into the reality of his responsibilities. Those few moments with Sarah felt too fleeting, the pressure to conform to traditional paradigms creeping back into his heart. Jack. What are you thinking? Sarah's voice beckoned, pulling him from his turbulent thoughts. He hesitated, the weight of the decision lodged heavy in his throat. Should he succumb to traditional corporate norms or risk everything by embracing authenticity? The consequences spilled through his mind like ink spreading on a page, blurring the lines of what he had once considered the only path to success. Jack's resolve began to crystallize into a decisive moment. I need to take this risk both for me and for my team. But I don't want to do it alone. The words surprised him, but they felt profoundly true. You won't be alone, Jack, she said softly. And remember, real change comes from genuine connection, even when it's uncomfortable. With her words echoing in his mind, Jack felt an unexpected surge of confidence. He had to confront Mark, challenge the status quo, and assert his vision of a new leadership style. As they said their goodbyes, Jack couldn't shake the gravity of the decisions he had just begun to ponder. Heading back to his car, he felt the tightrope of uncertainty stretch beneath him. The dawning realization, however, was that every risk taken stood as an opportunity to redefine both his professional identity and his valued connections. But just as he turned the key in the ignition, his heart raced at the thought of the upcoming board meeting and Mark's anticipated rebuttals. Could he truly follow through? Would he have the courage to stake his claim for a more human approach to leadership? The moment of decision loomed, and Jack couldn't shake the sense that his entire career might pivot on the next steps he took. The stakes had never felt higher. What would be revealed when he finally faced Mark and the executive team? Jack's heart thudded as he sat in his car, the engine idling. The comforting hum faded against the roar of rising anxiety. He was on the verge of something that could alter not just his career, but his outlook on who he was and, more importantly, who he wanted to be. The prospect of the board meeting loomed over him like an ominous cloud, every scenario juggling between his mind's fears. Driving along the familiar route home, Jack's thoughts tumbled in chaotic succession. He pictured the spacious boardroom, the polished table reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights, and the expectant faces of his fellow executives. What would they say? Would they chastise him for challenging convention? Yet the sharper question pulsated in his mind: why had he allowed their perceptions to shape his identity for so long? His thoughts darted uncontrollably. Years spent climbing the corporate ladder had left him feeling hollow, a puppet in a suit performing in a relentless program of expectations. The idea of leading with vulnerability was revolutionary, yet terrifying. Could he actually embody this new approach in the very environment that thrived on stoicism and hard metrics? Pulling into the driveway of his modest home, Jack took a moment to breathe, feeling the weight of the world pressing against his chest. He stepped out of the car, allowing himself to feel the chill of the evening air, a stark contrast that jolted his senses. He needed clarity, figuring out how to bridge the gap between what had been and what could be. In the quiet of his home, Jack poured himself a glass of water, trying to physically wash away the tension. He faced his reflection in the kitchen window. The man staring back seemed a stranger, a composite of industries, spreadsheets, and trends. But gazing deeper, he felt a flicker, a remnant of the man who longed for authenticity, who craved connection beyond profit margins. A whisper inside urged him to nail down his presence, to step into the room prepared not with excuses, but with a vision. Jack began pacing, rehearsing his potential dialogue with Mark. It needed to be precise and impactful. A leader isn't defined by metrics alone, it's time we shift focus to our people. Could those words carry the necessary weight to break through their entrenched ways? He questioned if it was foolish enthusiasm or genuine ambition. His phone buzzed on the counter, a chilling reminder of the meeting. With a shaky breath, Jack picked it up, scrolling through notes he had made last week. Suddenly, a message he had forgotten lit up the screen. It was from Sarah, checking in to see how he had been. For a moment, her name eased the tension in his chest. Glancing back at his reflection, he saw not just a CEO, but a man who could lead with empathy. He remembered Sarah's words, "Real change comes from genuine connection." Wasn't that worth pursuing? The once distant notion of vulnerability transformed into an actionable strategy. If he wanted to facilitate authentic leadership, he had to model it first. As he mentally prepared his strategy for the meeting, he felt the spark of determination igniting a long-buried passion for his work. Fueled by the thought of inspiring others, he made a decision: he would present his ideas directly, challenges and all. Jack's resolve solidified into a plan. He would ask the hard questions necessary to provoke thought among his peers. But as Jack settled into bed that night, the certainty of his decision hung awkwardly in the air, mixed with the fear of rejection. What if everything collapsed around him? What if Mark, eager to maintain the status quo, dismissed his vision? The conflict swirled within him, but amid that turmoil was an undeniable conviction. Tomorrow was the day he would either stand and be counted or fade into his old role as a passive spectator in the corporate game. With thoughts swirling, his final conscious thought was both thrilling and terrifying: he was about to risk everything to redefine not only his leadership but who he was as a person. In the hush that followed, Jack settled into sleep, dreams of a transformed boardroom and a community of innovators mingling with the fear of impending confrontation. The dawn would arrive with decisions looming. The thought hugged his mind tightly: would he zap the board with his newfound vision, or would he shrink back into the parallel of expectations pouring from those calculating eyes of Mark? The moment to confront his demons approached, and Jack felt both dread and excitement coursing through his veins. The morning light broke through the slats of Jack's blinds, casting stripes across his face. He blinked awake, the realness of the day crashing upon him like waves against a rocky shore. This was at the board meeting that could either catapult him into the realm of authentic leadership or shatter the fragile resolve he had so painstakingly constructed overnight. As Jack prepared for his day, each movement felt deliberate. The brush of his teeth, the ties he tied, the shirt he buttoned all symbolized a vital transition. This wasn't just dressing for a meeting, it was an act of commitment to his newly forged self. He donned the suit not as a mask, but as armor against the impending storm of doubt and distraction. Walking to his car, Jack took a moment to mentally prepare. He visualized the board members. Each face reflected their own fears and ambitions, yet also a shared humanity he intended to leverage. Would they regard his new mindset as strength or weakness? This question simmered beneath the surface as he gripped the steering wheel, determination coiling in his chest. Arriving at the office, the atmosphere buzzed with controlled chaos: phones rang, keyboards clicked, and muted conversations tumbled between walls. Jack stepped into the elevator, softly whispering to himself the groundwork of his pitch: we need to foster vulnerability, we can achieve growth through understanding. Each word was a note in a symphony he hoped to conduct later. Upon stepping into the boardroom, every eye landed upon him, some glimmering with curiosity, others tempered with skepticism. At the head of the table sat Mark, his formidable presence almost suffocating. Jack swallowed hard, forcing his hands to rest on the table, palms pressed flat. The tension crackling through the air was palpable. "Thank you all for being here today," Jack began, his voice steady yet firm. "I want to talk about leadership and our role in inspiring those around us." He paused, letting that sink in. Would they brace themselves for the incoming wave of change? Jack sensed the skepticism as he moved through his presentation. Metrics and projections floated past him like distant clouds, but he anchored himself in the emotional aspect of leadership, the connections that built trust, the strength found in vulnerability. He sought to illuminate those long-forgotten pathways, yet felt the weight of the room pushing back against his vision. A hand shot up. Sarah, a bold advocate for innovation. "Jack, what you're suggesting sounds ideal, but how do we measure that against quarterly outcomes?" Her voice dripped with genuine inquiry, yet Jack detected the underlying challenge, questioning the feasibility of his vision amidst corporate bullseyes. "Sarah, I propose we view our people as our primary asset, measuring engagement and output not solely in numbers, but in their growth and satisfaction." As he spoke, he felt a surge of courage, a wave of conviction that he was lighting a flame rather than dousing it. Mark's voice cut in. "But that's a colossal shift, and it risks our stability. We need metrics, Jack. We can't just wing it on ideals." The challenge was as stark as it was clear, and Jack's heart raced as he faced the pressing demands of reality. Frustration bubbled inside him, but it was stitched with a resolve born from his internal journey. Responding, he dug deeper. "Stability doesn't come from rigid formulas, it emerges when we foster real relationships. People perform better when they feel valued." The room went silent, and Jack's words hung suspended like an unspoken truth. The anticipation mingled with doubt, an electric tension that ignited in his chest. Had he crossed a threshold, or had he simply laid bare too much vulnerability too soon? He had committed to this change, tested the boundaries of conventional wisdom. A sense of primal instinct urged him forward. He couldn't back down now. He was at the precipice of his own transformation, but would he bear the consequences of standing against the current flowing toward conservatism? As the meeting progressed, conversations began sparking among the board members, a tentative exchange where ideas flowed not from fear but from curiosity. Jack's heart surged. Maybe this was the beginning of something profound. The meeting closed, and Jack felt exhilarated yet drained. They hadn't fully embraced his vision, but sparks of dialogue ignited within the group, hinting at something shifting. Yet, Mark's piercing gaze lingered. "We need to have a serious discussion about the implications of all this." Jack felt the weight of that statement pressing down, and in that moment, uncertainty swarmed anew. Had he triggered the beginning of a rebellion or simply invited scrutiny? As Jack exited, the tension hummed within him. He was forging a new path, carving out an identity beyond the metrics, but danger loomed ahead. The real conflict was still brewing. Would he truly become the leader he aspired to be, or would he falter under the weight of expectation? And the biggest question loomed, was he prepared to face the fierce resistance that could still crash down upon him? Jack stepped out of the boardroom, the shuffling of papers and murmurs of subdued conversation fading behind him, yet the heaviness of Mark's words pressed on his shoulders. The hallway stretched out in front of him, a stark contrast to the vibrant energy he had tried to cultivate moments earlier. He leaned against the cool wall, willing his breath to steady. Had he truly ignited curiosity, or had he merely stirred a dangerous cauldron of dissent? The reality of leadership pierced his mind. No longer was it simply about metrics and projections, it was now interwoven with vulnerability and genuine human connection. But as transformative as this moment had felt, Jack could still feel the gravity of Mark's skepticism hanging like an ominous cloud. His phone buzzed in his pocket, jolting him from his reverie. It was a message from Lisa, the HR director, compassionate yet direct. "Let's chat after lunch. I sense some friction in the air." Jack's stomach tightened at the thought of further scrutiny. This was becoming more than just a corporate shift, it was a battleground for his own beliefs. He realized he had to prepare, to fortify his position, and to seek allies in this evolving landscape. During lunch, Jack opted for solitude in the cafeteria, his plate remaining untouched as he mulled over strategies. Instead of pining over immediate rejections, he took stock. What were the truths he could share? He found inspiration in visualizing each board member's potential anxieties: Mark's fear of instability, Sarah's need for validation, and the silent concerns of others who might follow them. He had to make them see that their success was intertwined with a culture of openness. Suddenly, Sarah approached him, her expression slightly less guarded. "Jack, I've been thinking," she started tentatively. "Your ideas do make sense on some levels, but you know Mark isn't wrong about the metrics. It feels like you're asking us to leap before we know where we'll land." Jack's pulse quickened, this was his opening. "I get it. But think of it this way, what happens when people feel safe? They innovate. They take risks. They aren't just cogs in a machine, they become invested in the company's success." Jack's voice grew stronger with each word, emboldened by a flicker of hope igniting within him. Their conversation meandered from strategy to experiences, real moments of growth that had humble beginnings. Sarah shared her passion for mentoring young talent, and together they discussed a potential initiative to bridge generational gaps within the company. Jack began to feel the momentum shift, seeds of collaboration were blossoming from his once solitary struggle. "Let us present this to the team," Sarah suggested, a newfound excitement in her eyes. "If we can position it so we're learning collectively from each other, it could resonate." The notion of collaboration glimmered with promise, and Jack immediately grasped its implication. It wasn't just about him fighting for a vision, it was about weaving together their diverse insights to create collective strength. He could harness this potential for synergy if he was willing to be more vulnerable, to admit that he didn't have all the answers and needed their support. As they finalized their thoughts, Jack felt lighter, energized by the connection they had forged. Yet, beneath that excitement lingered the knowledge that he had to face Mark. The exchange with Sarah opened a door, but would it lead to understanding, or would Mark cement his perspective with further challenges? Determined, Jack walked back to his office. It was time to prepare for the conversation with Mark. He had taken the plunge into vulnerability, but now he needed to invoke authority. Embarking on a journey of change always came with risks, he had come too far to retreat now. Jack's mind raced as he planned his next steps. Could he balance the courage needed to foster vulnerability while maintaining strategic authority? The clock was ticking, he was stepping into uncharted waters where each decision weighed heavily on the future of his leadership. The moment he faced Mark would be pivotal. Would he seize it, or would he falter? The stakes couldn't be higher, the next meeting might either solidify his role as a leader or unravel his vision entirely. And behind every valiant move, the shadow of loneliness lingered, a part of him still anxious and uncertain about the path he had chosen. As he approached his office door, he took a deep breath and reminded himself of the purpose behind this struggle. The time had come to face the one challenge that could make or break him, Mark's impending judgment. Jack's fingers hovered over the doorknob, the anticipation swirling in his gut. He pushed the door open, steeling himself for the discussion he knew would define his leadership trajectory. The flickering lights overhead cast shadows that danced in rhythm with his anxious thoughts. Mark was already seated, knees crossed and eyes fixed on his tablet, an embodiment of calm that sharply contrasted Jack's internal storm. The weight of expectation felt like a hammer striking an anvil as Jack took his seat across from him. He could sense that Mark was in the midst of formulating a strategy, a mental exercise in dismantling what Jack had begun to build. "Jack," Mark began without looking up, his tone clipped, "I know what you're trying to do, but can you assure me it won't derail our progress?" Jack inhaled deeply, feeling the moment stretch out before him, a tightrope walk between ambition and apprehension. "I believe that fostering a culture of openness is exactly what we need for innovation and engagement. If we don't encourage vulnerability, we risk stagnation." Mark finally raised his gaze, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. You talk about vulnerability as if it's a business strategy. But what about results? What about accountability? Can your vision stand up to scrutiny when it comes to our bottom line? Jack felt a flush of frustration, but even more intensely, a clarion call within. It can and it will. Accountability can coexist with trust. We need to recognize that our employees' input and creativity will drive us forward. Metrics 1T tell us everything, especially when people feel stifled. The moment hung suspended in the air. Mark's brow furrowed as he processed Jack's words, the tension thick, palpable. You're asking us to leap into the abyss, he replied, skepticism lacing his voice. And what if we land on our heads? Jack leaned in, driven by a blend of passion and desperation. What if we soar? Mark, I have seen companies transform when they embrace their human aspect instead of hiding behind spreadsheets. I'm not advocating recklessness, I'm advocating for informed risks where every team member feels like they have a stake. Our values shape our metrics. A moment of silence fell between them, the only sound being the rhythmic tapping of Mark's fingers on the tablet. Jack's heart raced as he wondered if he had pushed too far too soon. Would this make him seem like a visionary or a naive interloper? Well, what do you suggest we do differently? Mark finally asked, the challenge unmistakable in his expression. Jack seized the opportunity, recalling Sarah's talk about mentorship and collaboration. Let us create a workshop series focused on cross-departmental sharing, where every voice gets a chance to contribute openly. We can consolidate this initiative with hard data collection from pilot programs. That way, we draw a direct line between openness and our performance metrics. Mark leaned back, arms crossed. Interesting approach, but do you truly believe that people will share? There's a fear of exposure. Jack's thoughts shifted back to the conversations he had lately, including Sarah's enthusiasm and Lisa's support. Yes, but only if we lead by example. If we share our challenges and vulnerabilities, we dismantle that fear. A culture of openness starts at the top. Mark regarded him carefully, his expression inscrutable. The seconds dragged on, each tick of the clock amplifying Jack's sense of urgency. Would Mark see the merit in collaboration, or would Jack's aspirations be viewed as naive idealism destined for failure? Let me think about it, Mark finally said, tapping his fingers thoughtfully on his tablet. In the meantime, put together a proposal based on your ideas. We're not just letting the ship drift without a course. The conversation shifted, but Jack's mind remained focused, igniting with fresh resolve. Perhaps the idea of embracing vulnerability wasn't just a cultural shift, it was a necessary evolution for himself as a leader. If he could harness the courage to foster these discussions, cultivate willing participants, and invite in uncertainty, he might transcend the limitations of conventional leadership. As he exited the office, a sense of empowerment surged through him enough to pierce through the lingering shadows of self-doubt. Yet, he recognized this was only the beginning. Balancing authority with vulnerability was a tightrope act that would require constant vigilance and adaptation. What if Mark chose to sidestep Jack's proposal, instead reinforcing traditional practices? Jack needed an unshakable foundation to persuade not just Mark, but the others who were still skeptical. Determined to continue building alliances, Jack resolved to reach out to Lisa and Sarah for further collaboration. He knew they needed to strengthen their collective voice, but the nagging fear that it could lead to rejection still gnawed at him. Jack stepped into the bustling hallway, the upbeat chatter contrasting sharply with his thoughts. His pursuit of authenticity had begun to take on a life of its own, and there was no turning back now. The path forward was riddled with uncertainty, but the pursuit of connection brought newfound clarity. Ahead, a familiar figure appeared, Lisa, with an intent expression that hinted at urgency. As she approached him, Jack felt the spark of a new challenge ignite within him. Jack, she said, urgency tinging her voice, we need to talk. I just had a conversation with Mark. Lisa stood before him, the intensity in her eyes revealing the weight of what she was about to share. Jack's heart quickened, anxiety mixing with anticipation. The stakes were undeniably high, and for a moment, he felt the world narrowing to this singular interaction. "Mark is concerned about the direction you're proposing," she said, her tone measured yet firm. "He believes that your ideas could destabilize our immediate outcomes if we allocate resources to an initiative that focuses primarily on culture changes." Each word hung like a weight in the air, and Jack felt his stomach drop. "Did he mention any specific concerns?" Jack asked, doing his best to keep his voice steady. "Primarily, he's worried about how this will play with the board and our investors. They want to see numbers, Jack, not just feedback from workshops or team-building exercises." Lisa's gaze sharpened, and Jack appreciated her forthrightness. Here was an ally but also a gatekeeper of the corporate mindset he was trying to dismantle. Jack ruminated for a moment, grappling with the implications of this news. What if we presented the potential of these initiatives in a way that appeals to their need for results? He suggested, a spark of inspiration igniting within him. "We can set clear metrics that measure engagement, productivity, and retention rates before and after the workshops. If we can show a correlation, it could be a win-win." Lisa considered his words, a hint of approval flickering in her expression. "That could work. If we can frame it as a strategy to boost performance and not just an intangible cultural shift, they might be more receptive," she replied, nodding thoughtfully. "Why not bring Sarah in on this too?" Jack proposed, excitement bubbling inside him. "She understands on-the-ground realities and can help us shape the narrative." "Great idea," Lisa agreed, her demeanor softening. "Her insights could ground our proposals in practical initiatives. Let us plan to meet later this week to outline our strategy." As Jack walked alongside Lisa down the corridor, he felt revitalized. Each step towards collaboration was reinforcing his commitment to adopting a more open leadership style. Facing the realities of corporate life now felt less daunting, especially with allies like Lisa and Sarah beside him. Yet, as they reached the elevator, a shadow of doubt flickered across Jack's mind. Could they truly change the narrative, or would Mark's influence thwart their efforts? He shook off the apprehension, focusing instead on the potential of what this new pathway could deliver. In the days that followed, Jack, Lisa, and Sarah gathered frequently to craft detailed strategies, including feedback loops, collaborative workshops, and measurable KPIs. Every meeting deepened Jack's conviction: leadership was about fostering meaningful connections where creativity thrived. The atmosphere shifted, enthusiasm layering their old anxieties with a fresh perspective. Then, it happened. During a regular check-in meeting, Mark called Jack into his office. "Let us see your proposal," he said, his expression unreadable. Jack's palms felt clammy as he laid out his plans, the trio's collective efforts articulated with both clarity and passion. For every concern Mark raised, Jack countered with data points backing the transformative potential of a more connected workforce. "Look, the financial realities are important, but do you realize we could be training our leaders to foster environments where innovation thrives? That aligns with our bottom line in a way that stifling creativity never could." Mark leaned back, visibly intrigued. "And you truly believe that shifting our focus can foster growth?" "I know it can," Jack replied, his voice steady now. "But only if we acknowledge that our greatest asset is our people. They'll rally behind us if they feel cared for and heard." The room fell silent, tension hanging like a heavy mist. Jack's heart raced. Would this be the turning point? "Fine, let us test a pilot program," Mark finally said, an edge of concession in his voice. "If it works, we'll consider expanding." A wave of relief washed over Jack as a small smile crept onto his face. "Thank you, Mark," he replied, a newfound confidence swelling inside him. In the days that followed, Jack reflected on the trajectory of his journey. Each interaction, every connection made, and the way he urged himself to be authentic propelled him toward a new phase of growth. They launched the pilot program with budding enthusiasm, the feedback trickled in, revealing increased engagement levels, a surprising spike in productivity, and employees feeling more invested than ever. As the weeks passed, Jack stood at the forefront of this change, increasingly recognized for shifting perspectives. His title resonated less in the boardroom, but his authenticity spoke volumes more. And then came the unexpected validation, a direct message from Sarah. "I heard about the pilot program's success. You're becoming the leader you always wanted to be." Hallmarked with encouragement, it lit a path of pride and fulfillment within him. Jack sat in his office, a quiet moment of introspection filling him with a sense of authentic achievement. This was no longer just about business acumen, it was about realizing that his personal journey was a vital strand connecting the fabric of his professional life. In this moment of profound clarity, he recalled the loneliness that had once suffocated him. The gilded cage he thought was success had given way to a world where authentic connection was paramount. Jack embraced the learning that came from navigating fear, holding on to the newfound courage that now defined his leadership and, ultimately, his identity. This was just the beginning. As he prepared for the next meeting and the opportunity to share the results with the board, he felt solid confidence exploding within him. He had conquered the shadows of expectation, proved that fostering vulnerability had value, and accomplished something far beyond mere profits. He de-established a workplace culture grounded in sincerity and real connection. Jack reflected on the journey to this moment, his eyes set toward a brighter future. He had navigated a path that transformed not only the corporate culture of Henderson Enterprises but also his life. The kaleidoscope of possibilities unfurled before him, brimming with hope and promise, a fresh slate for a true leader. Now, more than ever, he was ready to embrace the next chapter. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories showing incredible transformations. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help share these inspiring messages. Comment your reactions and theories about Jack's outstanding journey. What lessons resonate most with you? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion on personal growth and transformation.